How's everyone feeling? Are we attentioned out yet? No? Okay. Just 2 more sessions, guys, and then we don't have to speak about it for the rest of the day. My name is Ben Dimond. I'm the head of commercial at Playground XYZ. It's an old picture. Promise you it is actually me. I work for a company that is an attention measurement and optimization platform for the industry. And attention's kind of interesting for me. It's a bit polarizing because in my work life, I spend my whole day speaking about attention. And in my personal life, I have a 3-year-old. And it's actually her birthday today. I said to her this morning, Daddy's got to go now because I'm going to go to an industry event and speak to the advertising industry about the importance of attention metrics in digital advertising. But I love you very much and I'll be back later. And she said, is it time for cake? Like literally no attention whatsoever coming from a 3-year-old. So that's my life. So look, guys, what I'd love to show you today is just some of the work we're doing with our customers about linking attention with outcomes. So it's been a real theme of today, I think. I think in pretty much every session today, we've heard someone sort of reference the importance of linking attention to outcomes and where that adds the value. So what I'd love to do is just show you the work we're doing with our customers to demonstrate that value. And we're doing that through gaining a better understanding of the requisite level of attention required to drive outcomes. And we call this approach helping find a brand's optimal attention. If this is going to work. Yeah, helping find a brand's optimal attention. And what I'm going to do is going to show you a few working examples of some brands we've actually done this for. And hopefully that insight's going to really back up some of the other talks you've heard today with some working examples. Just to start by saying, and you know, this has already been talked about already, but really for brands and anyone out there who's a brand or who works very closely with brands from the agencies, we all know that brands don't wake up in the morning trying to drive a better CTR or a better viewability score. It's all about outcomes. It's all the whole strategy of running media campaigns is to drive better outcomes, things like sales lift, brand lift, that type of thing. And really what these media metrics are all about is helping us just keep a tabs on that when we're running media campaigns because they're typically available in real time and to enable us to do optimization. The challenge with a lot of the media metrics that we've been used to so far in the industry, things like viewability and click-through rate, they're not great drivers of those outcomes. It doesn't seem to be a huge correlation with those particular metrics and outcomes. And that's kind of where there's a lot of excitement. That's why events like today exist, because what we are finding from attention metrics, let's try that again. Oh, seem to be skipping. Oh, sorry, it's kind of taken over. So what we are finding from attention metrics is there is this great link with outcomes. And that's where there's a lot of excitement at the moment. Some of the other characteristics of attention as a metric, which is kind of important and where it also links back to outcomes, is the fact that attention as a metric is non-sparse. So if you think about some metrics that exist out there, they're very sparse. Click-through rate, very sparse. You get a bit of data off a click-through rate 1 in 1,000 times maybe, which makes it very hard to draw analysis from that. Even outcomes data in itself can be quite sparse. So the fact that attention data you're able to measure it on every single impression makes it very good to apply data analysis to it and start to look for trends. It's available in real time. We talk about attention as a leading indicator, and outcomes, typically things like brand lift, sales lift, they're lagging indicators. Not saying they're not important, they're the most important thing, but you typically find out about them after the campaign's finished, and sometimes quite a long time after the campaign's finished. So being able to use those in flight for campaign optimization to improve your media, it's very difficult. Now, where attention comes in is it's a leading indicator. Because we can access it in real time, we can actually use it as a lever to optimize our campaigns in flight. And that makes it actionable. It means you can intervene, you can optimize based on it, and that makes it extremely powerful. So things we know about attention, I've mentioned it's a great proxy or predictor of outcomes. That's its main main selling quality. But the other thing is that we know about attention is that not all attention is created equally. And this, I think, is fascinating. One brand versus another brand might need a different level of attention to drive their business outcomes. And that's because there's a number of things in play here. Is it a brand leader or brand challenger? Like, how well known is the product? What creative are they using? What type of goal are they trying to drive? And because of that, you might need loads of attention or not that much attention. And it's kind of interesting, I think, when we think about that, if you then compare it back to viewability, where the industry went with viewability was setting a standard, but also setting a benchmark. You know, for those of you in the room who've been on the sales side, you know, agencies would have asked, it needs to get above the 70% threshold for every brand. Every brand had this 70% threshold. You know, and eventually maybe there was some slight modifications made to that. But really where we think this thing's going with attention, that different brands might need different levels of attention to drive different goals. And then the third thing is that actually different channels we know drive different levels of attention. But the potency of attention in those channels is different too. You might get 7 seconds of attention in YouTube and 2 seconds of attention in TikTok, but they might drive a similar level of outcome for you. So it's really important for a brand to understand, you know, how the attention relates to outcomes per channel. So, as I mentioned, what we do at Playground is we're an attention measurement and optimization company. The customers that we work with, we measure their in-flight activity for attention, and we do that in real time, which allows them to make, not just to see measurement in real time, but also make optimizations. And by the way, when I'm talking about attention, because as I'm sure most of you know, there's different definitions of what attention actually is and how it's measured. Just for context, we're a company that believe attention is people looking at things and how long they look at things for, you know, with ads specifically. And so we fall into the bucket of companies that use eye tracking technology and predictive models off the back of it to scale it, very much like our friends over at Lumen and Amplified Intelligence. So we definitely fall into that bucket. So when I say attention, I'm talking about people looking. So optimal attention is all about bridging the gap between measuring in real time and linking it to outcomes. And so I'm just going to show you a little bit of our methodology of how we're working with customers to do that. So like I say, these are like a working example, and I'll show you some case studies in a second. So it's not just about creating a testing framework to get an understanding of optimal attention. It's actually then what can you do with that once you know it. And we kind of like refer to it as the attention journey that we go on with our customers. So the first thing is we've got to link attention to outcomes. That's like the number one thing we've got to do. And we do that by working closely with the customers that we have, and we take in their outcomes data. So we absorb their outcomes data that they bring in. It could be a number of things. It could be website activity, conversion driving. It could be brand lift. It could be conversion. It could be sales, whatever it might be. And what we're looking to do is we're looking to plot the outcomes on one axis, and we're looking to plot the attention that the campaign got on another axis. And what we're looking to see here is what we call an attention curve, kind of this curve that's on the screen, to start understanding the relationship between those two worlds. As attention time went up, what happened to the outcomes? Did it go up or left or sideways or whatever? And then this is a fictitious example for Facebook, but you kind of get the idea of the type of thing we're looking for. And really, what we want to learn from this is we want to use this curve to help identify optimal attention. So you can kind of see here from this is a fictitious curve, sort of made up numbers, but just for the to showcase it. As attention time went up to 1 second, we saw a slight lift in outcome. As it went up to 3 seconds, we saw a bit more of a lift in terms of the outcome. But after something happened after 3 seconds of that particular creative on Facebook, as it went from 3 to 4, big lift in the outcome. That's a real spike, 15% lift. And then what you can kind of see afterwards is a slight plateauing. We'd almost look at that as maybe diminishing returns. Start to see that it doesn't keep growing and growing. And that, for this particular example, would say to us that the optimal attention that this brand would want to be looking at would be 4 seconds. That's what we would show back to them. You know, your optimal on Facebook for this creative is 4 seconds. And this kind of starts to borrow a little bit from the world of understanding like reach sufficiency. This is sort of like almost like attention sufficiency. How much attention is sufficient for your campaign? And we start to do this for brands in all different channels. As I mentioned before, the channels will operate different links to outcomes. So maybe for this particular client we're working with, optimal looks like 6 seconds for YouTube, but 4 seconds for Facebook, and 2 seconds for TikTok, and 1 second for display. So it's important to map all these things out separately. And really, the whole point of this thing is to get rid of wastage, which I'm sure is pretty obvious. But not enough attention, not enough lift in your outcome, and therefore the campaign's ineffective. But actually, there's wastage on the other side too, like surplus attention, like too much attention. And that's not to say that we have any research to show that getting too much attention is actually a negative thing on the outcomes. It's more about the fact that if it doesn't drive the outcomes up anymore, and we start to see that diminishing return, if that comes at the cost of more expensive inventory or decreased reach, then that's when it becomes suboptimal. And so, in this world, we start to see that, for this example, 4 seconds would be an optimal attention score for the client. Okay, so we've worked with the client, we've done all this analysis, we've done all their curves, we've presented it back to the customer, and they say, fantastic, now what do I do? And you go, well, now you have your optimal attention scores. You don't have to necessarily base it on industry benchmarks or anything anymore. Because this is what, of course, the crux of this is. Like, how do I use attention in my working media to actually help me drive results? And so they can start using it for their planning. So if a client understands that 4 seconds was optimal on Facebook and 6 seconds was optimal in YouTube, again, these are sort of fictitious numbers, but just for the illustrative purposes, they can start saying, well, look, I know I don't get 6 seconds from my YouTube bumpers. Is there any point in putting them on the plan? Probably not. Let's leave them off. Same with certain formats on Facebook, TikTok, etc. But then after the campaign's been planned and it goes live, it doesn't stop there because, of course, it's all about understanding, are you reaching your optimal attention? Great to understand it theoretically, great to plan to it. Now, are we actually reaching it when we run our live campaign? So this is where we start to measure and optimize to attention. So, again, in this example, maybe this client, 6 seconds was their optimal for YouTube. They're getting 7 seconds. They're actually above. They can afford to probably rein back in if they're spending a bit more on media and they don't need to. So there's potentially some things they could drop out to get to their optimal level, or not if they're happy to kind of go over. Facebook example, they're under, so they need to make some optimizations and so on and so forth. And these type of optimizations they can make can be down to, maybe when they look into a real-time dashboard of how their campaign's pacing to attention, they might find certain audience types or contexts that they're targeting are over-pacing or under-pacing. They might find certain creatives are doing better than others, devices, and all these type of things. So this is where sort of like in-flight optimization comes in. It's not, we don't believe this thing is a set and forget thing. It's not plan to attention, then forget about it. It's very much living and breathing and need to, just like we do with any other metric that we measure for our campaigns, understand where the level you need to aim for, and then optimize in flight to make sure you get there. Okay, that's all the sort of theory and stuff. Just going to show you a few examples of where we've done this for customers. So this is, like I say, these are working examples that we've done. They kind of come in, there's 3 different examples I'm going to give here, and they come from an array of different advertiser types and different kind of goals. So this was a case study from a financial services brand. They were using standard display advertising, looking to drive page visits and conversions on the site. So very much performance, lower funnel stuff. The way we work with them is they were able to give us all that data. It's nice and easy to take in that data. It's very easily available for the brand and easy to share and easy to draw correlations from. So we took in that website activity data from them. We were measuring attention across the campaign, and we started to build out this curve for them. So what we found for this particular brand is that, as you can see, the curve starts going up as the attention time starts going up. But at about 1.5 seconds, we start to see that both of those curves started to plateau a little bit and start to flatten out. And when we start to look at cost analysis as well, things that were going that were above the 1.5 seconds started to cost the client more, so much so that it made it suboptimal. So for this particular customer, 1.5 seconds on standard display activity was what they wanted to aim for. Certainly nothing lower than 1.5 seconds. Anything lower than 1.5 seconds of standard display activity for attention wasn't worth it for them. The second customer, again, is kind of similar in a way because they were also using standard display activity programmatically. This particular brand was looking to drive cost per test drive, so efficient cost per test drive on their site. And again, we worked with them, sort of took in their outcomes data and started to look at a curve. And what we found here was the actual amount of attention required was quite a bit less, under a second. Now, a lot of people might be looking at that and going, that doesn't seem like very much attention. But we just got to just contextualize it slightly. In the world of standard display, and you saw something that Mark Slade put up on screen earlier, the world of standard display, the benchmarks, I think he had at 1.1 seconds for standard display as an average. What we see is it goes from anything from 0 up to about 2 seconds, with 2 seconds being those really big half pages, billboards, which typically are not the things you will buy for a lower funnel campaign trying to drive conversions. So with that context in mind, these numbers start to make a little bit more sense. So when we overlay conversion data, cost per test drive, cost per keep me informed, cost per configurated car, this was the level of attention that this particular brand would require in order to be really efficient with their buying. And just the last example, which is a bit of a different one because this one's talking about YouTube, not standard display, and it's talking about brand awareness, not lower funnel. And this was for a health insurance brand. So this particular brand, again, taking the outcomes data, the brand awareness data that they had, and did this analysis of between the two worlds. Much more attention required to drive brand lift for this particular advertiser on YouTube. Actually 5.5 seconds. And the interesting thing here, I think, which is also different, is YouTube's a moving medium, right? Sight, sound, emotion, all that sort of stuff. Which, like, we saw that Specsavers ad earlier. If you stop that ad at a certain point, unless you'd seen the ad before, if you stop that ad at a certain point, you might not have a clue who was advertising. And so the thing with video ads, depending on how the creative is made, will impact the way that people might be aware of the message or the brand or recall it. So that's where we start to see these differing levels of attention required in order to hit a goal. You might be super, like if a brand puts their logo right at the front, you know, McDonald's brings you the new blah, 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 you might only need 2 seconds of attention to drive, you know, a lift. But for this particular brand, we found that in order to get the optimum amount of lift, it was 5.5 seconds. So that's how we work with brands at the moment. Hopefully some of those case studies were kind of interesting and useful. What's next for those type of brands? Well, of course, once a brand has their optimal attention score, then they can use it to help them plan. So you can start to understand where you should put your media in order to drive the optimal attention. And then they can start optimizing. And you know, the brands we work with, our customers, can do optimization in a number of ways. We have supply-side marketplaces from our supply-side partners that we work with, which kind of curate inventory to get to certain levels of attention. Buy-side optimization tools via things like DV360 and Xandr, and more recently, Mediation Flash Talking for their social DSP. And for all our brands who we work with, they're all using our real-time dashboard, which means you're able to spot how much attention you're garnering from your live campaign and make adjustments in order to make sure you're hitting optimal. That's it from me. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day.